morning, everyone. Hello, Lele. Kia ora. Kia ora tātou. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to members of the public. Usually acknowledge the media, but they're not usually present these days. They're more joining us by Zoom. So just a reminder that we are live streaming, and just welcome everyone watching the video as well. Get things underway. First of all, with any apologies. So we have an apology for lateness from Councillor Percival. Is there any other apologies? Move to Councillor Holding, second Councillor Kingham. Say aye. Aye. And against, that's carried. Okay. Do we have any declarations of interest? Just note my interest in one of the items in public excluded. Very interested in that. So I'll note that. Do you think the public are entitled to know me, future? What this interest might be? No, it's much more fodder for Facebook if I don't sell them. I can't actually see the item. Oh, sorry, the 10.4 Chief Executive's report excluded regarding the election of President and Vice President of the Government of New Zealand. Right, so we'll move now, or just double check there's no other questions. Okay, move on to public forum. And we had a number of speakers listed who aren't quite here yet, but we'll start with Tavish, representing Hamden Community Energy Group, ably supported today with the other members of the group. So welcome along. And talk about the exciting project you've got underway.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship, and good morning, everyone. We're from Hamden Community Energy Society, and I have with me Rachel Welton and Aline Arnauden, who are both members of our committee and steering group. Structure-wise, you've kind of given us 10 minutes, but we just want to talk for about 5 of those. I'll talk for a couple of minutes, and then I've got a little movie because Matt Hannigan wanted to be here, but he's put himself on a wee movie for you guys, and so I just want to show that. It's a wee 2.5 minute movie. So the first, if I could have the first slide up, please.
Oh, sorry, you do it.
Yeah. Do I just... yeah. So no, it's a bit.
Briefly.
Just one. Good. So, as you probably know, Hamden is an English village, and we looked very hard for a place like this. And you may, I'm sure Jim knows about this program, but you may have seen it, and it's set in a beautiful English village down in the south somewhere. And if you haven't seen it, it's a highly entertaining little place where they fix up old stuff. And so it was kind of the inspiration in some ways, or has come to our notice. And but we couldn't find a place like that, so we're into trying to build something. Whoops. It's very slow, this, isn't it? It just takes a wee minute to click over. You've all, I see you've got the full thing in your notes, so I don't intend to go through that, but I just thought it was worth putting this up just to remind you of the proposal. The school is just below us, just off the bottom of the picture, and this is the concept. In the top left there's already some properties. The top right is an effluent disposal area for the public toilets in Hamden, and the drawing is what we propose. And there's essentially 3 spaces we're trying to put together. The central one is an engineering workshop well, we haven't found a better word than dirty, for dirty work, dusty work of all sorts. One of the other ones on the side is for arts and craft, and the other one is a space for office and meetings and that sort of thing, and possibly someone to remain there when the school is using it to make sure they don't cut their fingers off or do something awful. Yeah, just to make about 3 points about it, I'll just move this on if I can, one slide. Yeah, the design itself, of course, we haven't got money to employ someone to design it yet, because we haven't got access to the land. So, but we've just been talking about some different building concepts. The design on the bottom left is from Great Southern, a cross section of the sort of building we've been talking about. And the brown wooden building on the left is that sort of shape. Because it's opposite a school and we're hoping to integrate both school and community, we thought that it'd be rather fun to have something that was fun in the way of colour or that kind of thing. And the bottom right there is maybe more sort of an arty, crafty kind of concept with perhaps natural building, so people can learn to use local materials, maybe hay bales and mud and things like that. You know, the kids probably get their hands into that. So without saying more, I think we'll just show you the movie now, and it's Matt Hannigan, who's the principal of the school. Thank you. Do I need to push this? Oh, no, it's good. Yeah. I think you'll be entertained by his little movie. He's a school teacher.
An entertaining school teacher.
Yes.
Is that an oxymoron?
My name is Matt Hannigan. I am the principal of Hampden School here in North Otago. Sorry I can't be there with you all today. The joys of being a teaching principal at a U1 school is that I'm teaching, unfortunately, and we couldn't be able to get a release or a reliever, and funds are a bit tight this time of year with sickness, so unfortunately I have to present this to you this way. I am obviously putting my backing behind the Hampden Community and School Garden and Workshop project for several reasons, which I'll try and go through quite quickly. Obviously, we feel like it's going to provide our students with a lot of life skills, so that could be skills that they may not be receiving in their day-to-day life, such as, I don't know, whether it be sewing, cooking, woodwork, carpentry, all those sorts of skills that maybe aren't getting passed down through the generations. So this is a good way to do that. It also helps us with our community connections, which is a huge goal of ours in our strategic plan and our charter, and that is the wider community, not just our school community. So it'll help with strengthening our community connections. It provides integrated learning, so they can do their reading, writing and maths, but do it in a sort of a hands-on practical way, which is really important for our modern learners, we're finding. We think it will also provide them with thoughtful lifelong learners, which is one of our values at school as well. So again, fits in perfectly with what we're doing. It's also a sustainable approach, which of course in this modern age is very important, and it's something that we value here at Hampden School. Furthermore, it's going to create tuakana-tina relationships. So not only are we going to be learning from the people at the community centre, but they'll also be learning from us. So it's a win-win situation in my thoughts. And practicality, kids love that practical hands-on learning, so it's going to be really, really vital and helpful with that too. So that's in a nutshell why we are strong supporters of the whole project and the whole possibility of this going ahead. It's a no-brainer for us, and we just think it's a really, really workable concept. And it is something that obviously is going to be right on our doorstep, and it's going to be something unique here in North Otago, because I haven't seen any other school or community come together and come up with a project such as this that I'm aware of, and I think this is the perfect location for it. So certainly has our backing, and as you can see, I've just walked out, and we are, look at how perfect it would be. Okay, here we are. Okay, and this is where it would be behind us here, so fits in really well with where the school is. So more than happy at another stage to answer any questions, but yep, great initiative, and it's certainly got the backing of Hamden School. Cheers.
What video I've seen for a while.
For a school teacher. I'm sorry there wasn't that lag in it when we brought it in.
Yeah.
I don't know what's happened there. Yeah.
For sure on that one. That's okay.
Yeah.
You certainly got the message.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, so just to be clear, we're just asking for access to the land to be able to do that. There's currently a leasee just grazing it for a nominal amount, and they're happy for us to take over, and also they'll continue grazing anyway because we don't need to do that.
Okay, councillors' questions. Councillor Hopkins.
Well, thanks for that, and good luck with it. Any shed's a good shed. But just curious, the documents you've given us tell us that you've got 50,000 already from the recycling centre.
Yeah.
But the total cost of this is going to be 150,000. Given that I suppose there's an opportunity cost for ratepayers and making land available to you guys at rental and so on. Where do you see that other 100,000 coming from? Have you got other sources of funding that will allow you to, to complete funding package?
We've got an expert here on this.
I've been going through a long list of possible grant funders, and the list might have been like 50 different funders. And I was able to narrow it down to, there's still 21 that our project would fall in their categories, whether it's education or environment or learning or community. So there's quite a few opportunities out there, including 3 that will fund sort of bigger capital building type investments. And we've been in contact with one of them already.
Because I suppose, would you see us making the land available on the basis that we are and that you've asked? Would you see that as the council's contribution, so to say, financial contribution?
Yeah, I think so. We're discussing on the way in what the difference is from the point of rating points of view and so forth. Of currently it's being grazed for, I don't know, $250 a year or something. And whether they use it or we use it, well, we're doing community service, so we hope we can do it in a way that is equitable and not, but we've been saving that money for quite a number of years for something like this, and we're prepared to put in a lump to set that baseline. Just to be clear, that 150 is the bottom level. We were advised to assume something like $1,000 a square metre with a combination of professional and voluntary input. So it'll be more like 230 or 250,000 we'll be seeking overall. So that's why we're putting in a significant lump if we have to. Of course, if we don't, we won't. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Holden.
Yeah, well done. Your vision and goals. It looks like a pretty great project for the small community, especially post-COVID resilience, sort of community building. So, what's your volunteer?
We got about 20 something.
Yeah, well, at least 20 on our, and we've got a committee that's
Meets monthly.
Yeah, that's 7 people. And we've been doing that for the last 8 years or so. So we've got a bit of credibility.
We built the top tip waste recycling shop down there, and we've been running that for that period too. So we've got background. I should also say that the concept's been tested in a way because Murray Askin, who used to be the carpentry teacher at East Otago High, Peter probably remembers, set up a club effectively in Meraki in a double garage, and it was very successful for a number of years till we left, so we know it should work.
I must say, if any group can get it off the ground, I know you guys probably I just hope that if council day that you build that into your funding applications as another of using the cost of that to help bolster what your contribution is, because I think it'll really help.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And as Mel said, if anyone can, I'm sure the Hamilton Community Energy Group can. And the support of the school and behind you. It is a big act, a big, hairy, audacious goal. You've done those before, and you've succeeded. And I think the Hamilton community generally is very much can-do type of group. So we'll look forward to that agenda item. Just trying to see where we are. So we'll hope to get on to that next 40 minutes or so.
Oh, yeah.
See how things go if you want to hang around for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be here.
Thank you very much for coming in and doing the presentation.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Now we have Craig. I'll say I did it on mic. Welcome, dear.
Hello, thank you. I'm just going to pass around some bits and pieces here so you can see posters, what we've been doing. And so we have been cracking on since last time we met. Oh, right. So these posters were for the general public. So in 2019, I presented to council an On Your Bike project, which was an education project we wanted to launch. It came about because I was once a pupil at Oamaru Intermediate School, and there were 250 bikes in those bike sheds. And this particular day, I was helping organise a triathlon, and there were two. Back at my old school. So I thought, what has happened? Why are we not biking? So we started this campaign. Since then, we've done in your booklets and things that you've given, we commissioned a Safe Ways to School Oamaru. This was a $9,200 social pinpoint media campaign that we did, concentrated on 4 schools. Rotary funded the lot, by the way, which was a fantastic contribution from them. They saw the vision in it and they're totally with it as well. This had 890 school children, parents and teachers responded out of 4 schools. We focused on just 4 because it was quite an expensive exercise to do each school. They would go online and they would click on a link and they would say where they thought there was a bad spot, a dangerous spot. They've had a good idea, so went to a light bulb, and just thoughts that they had about our roads to school. And in particular, of course, we were looking at the fact that generally people will come from Fenwick and they'll go out to Oamaru Intermediate School. So it was this sort of the primary school age we're focusing on. They are our future drivers. And they are obviously the people who we want to get to school safely every day, and hopefully by biking. So the interesting statistic was in other schools around New Zealand, only 88% of children go by car, in their car to school. We were interesting, we were only 63%, but that's still too high in my mind. So what's changed, of course, we have more people on the road driving more cars. We have less, because there are less children now, we used to have safety in numbers. We don't have that anymore because we don't have the kids cycling. One of the issues that the schools have is that they have this huge congestion issue at 9 and 3 through to 3:15, 3:30. And it's just cars blocking everything in Torridge Street, along those schools at outside Northside New World. Any of you who have been down there will know exactly how dangerous it is. So this was pinpointing a lot of that stuff, and it was hugely successful. One classroom, they got 100% success rate. The 3 Peaks may have helped, I'm not sure. But so that was a really cool thing, and that's ongoing. We aim to keep this updated, and it's kind of an evolving document. I'm working now with Jason Everard and Carrie's cool as well. You'll notice that the posters, they were the next thing. The posters were funded by you folk, and by the Waitaki District Council and our ratepayers. These are very cool. If you look, there's a very slim looking Carrie Hamilton. She loves it. She thinks it's great, and she hopes that the sticker never changes shape. We're hoping that other communities will take this on as well as a pilot program. Apparently, Timaru has Hot Bob as a constable, so I'm dying to meet Hot Bob, and he'll probably go in there and replace Carrie. So. Hot Jim, well, anytime, right. Okay, and another thing we have is these bags were donated by the freezing, Alliance Freezing Works. At this stage, we could only apparently fit 1.5 metres, really small. So these will go on top of people's bags. So I have 30 or 40 of those as well. Now the 1.5 metre campaign came about because I didn't know, I'd forgotten my road code, and 1.5 metres is the legal distance that a car must be to pass a cyclist. And I don't know how many of you folk knew that as well, but probably not many of us have remembered that that is in the road code. So there's a window sticker that you'll see somewhere, not in those stickers, no, it's on your bits and pieces. I'll bring it up on my phone. But the window sticker is the next, there we are. Now this was, we had it, we had on your bike up the top and so on. And I took it to Rotary one night and two councillors here said, no, forget the PC, because it didn't have an announcement. And they said, no, forget the PC, keep your distance. So that is now where we've gone, keep your distance 1.5 metres, that's our message. And you'll notice, although the signage isn't as effective as I'd like it to be, so we're going to change the signage that's out on the billboards because it's too busy, there's too much going on. So it'll just be that 1.5 metres, keep your distance. That's our big campaign. We will go from here. So lots happening. That's where the money's gone and the time. Of course, on the sticker, we didn't have the seat belts showing enough for the police, and we had to make fluoro seat belts, and then we had his eyes. The driver was this way, not that way, so we changed the eyes. So that sort of slowed up the graphics a bit, going to and fro. But I think and get to work, then ram it up on the way back to pick up their kids, and then back slow with their kids. That would be um, 7.4, which is the request from Waitaki District Health Services regarding the loan repayments. Personally, I feel that we're in the midst of a complete disaster with this worldwide pandemic, but if there is one silver lining to this whole situation, it is that there will be Kiwis employed in the health sector that will wish to return home to New Zealand, and there will be new immigrants that will be lining up to come to our country as the result of our response to COVID. In order for those people to want to come and work permanently at our hospital, and for us to take full advantage of that, I think we need to have a secure base for the hospital. The hospital needs to have secure funding and stability. I think the time has come for some sort of review so that we can look at what sort of health services we want here in the Waitaki region. Bruce Alberston made some good points to council last year about what our entitlement was, and that perhaps we're not at that level, and that needs careful consideration, particularly with the impacts of COVID, and if you know, we have a second wave or it re-emerges in the community. But funding is absolutely crucial, and rather than looking to prop up the hospital with loans, I think you need to examine the funds that we are getting from Southern District Health Board. I have asked them directly if they can account for where our bulk health funding is going, and they cannot. They said they do not have the systems in place to do that, and that is concerning. I think we need to know what we're entitled to, and we need to have some sort of control on how it's being spent, and making sure that it's being spent prudently. And I think if we can get that in place, if we can get a firm foundation in place for Oamaru Hospital with secure funding, with a definite view of what health services Waitaki wants in the future, then we'll be in a much better position to attract permanent staff, which builds better relationships at the hospital, leads to better healthcare, and is overall much better for the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to touch first on the harbour plan. I have seen the comments about the farmers markets and the email that came out, and the plan, or the diagram shown on page 33 is conceptual as such. The line that we're using is one we've agreed with the farmers market. We said how much do you need, and they've said we want up to this point here, and that's where the line is as far as any planning goes. So farmers market are happy with what's being planned, and but you know, certainly welcome all the feedback we can possibly get and make submissions once the draft's adopted, hopefully today. So thank you for that. Do we have any other comments or questions?
I think, Mayor Kusha, that the concerns were also about the area beyond the farmers market and whether development was going to occur there or not. But perhaps more details of that can come in public consultation.
Well, essentially, it's allowing for some space. There's got to be a good mix of car parking in there as well. So it needs to be reasonable, but we're putting it in there so that people can submit. Are they happy with it?
Right, and
they'll give us some feedback to go.
right. So certainly anybody that has any objections to high-rise buildings or very built-up development will have an opportunity to tell the council how they feel about that.
There's an opportunity here, and there's also an opportunity mainly in the district plan review, because that's where the ultimate control will come in around building heights, site coverage, setbacks, those sorts of things, which are all important about how it is to the public. So yeah, absolutely very open-minded on that. Just really want to get a lot of good submissions.
Good, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for coming. Okay, councillors, move on to confirmation of the previous meeting minutes, 4.1 on page 6. Councillor Hopkins, Councillor Holding, who seconded that. Okay, any other comments? Okay, put that. Those in favour of those being adopted, please say aye. Against? Carried. Just go on to 5.1 report. Things continue to move very quickly, certainly in the Three Waters space. We've got a report on that in the agenda today. It has been a lot of work. Thanks to all the councillors who were able to make it to the workshop in Timaru, which I also attended, and it was interesting seeing what was raised at that particular meeting. And then so went to the Invercargill one, and a lot of similar things were raised, but there was also slightly different questions asked. They were more into the real detail of the situation. So that was interesting. Just on the regional or the district and regional allocations. So with the $261 million allocated, a chunk of that goes off to Tamata Arawai, the regulator. The other money has been split 50% to TLAs and 50% to the regions, with the idea that the councils within each region will talk about that and come up with a plan of how they spend it. For some reason, we've had all ours lumped in with Canterbury, Canterbury, Otago. Otago and Southland have been working on reforms and what that looks like for that region. Also talking with Canterbury. Otago and Southland were funded by the government to get those talks underway, and I'm not sure if we've needed to put any money in at this stage, but I don't believe we have. Canterbury applied for funding, they didn't get it, so they're putting forward a model which would see $1 million of the regional allocation stay at the regional level, so that work can be done, and that means our 3.73 million that would be in that pot, which we would hopefully also get, gets reduced by $70,000. So it's just an email that came in yesterday, such as the moving nature of this. So anyway, that's the situation there, and there's a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes, particularly by our team, that work's going to look like. Other than that, Tourism Waitaki has had some great success with the funding application, so we're looking forward to hearing exactly what that does mean for the organisation and staffing and services that they offer. And we've got a couple of main things to touch on at the moment. So any questions, Councillor Newton?
Just in relation to the Tourism Waitaki funding, Has there been any indication from Tourism Waitaki as to whether they'll be updating their statement of intent sooner rather than later they've received?
I haven't had any discussions with them since.
Yeah, perhaps I can answer that. The board is meeting shortly to deal with that matter, and both in relation to the statement of intent and in relation to the contract, there are ongoing discussions between the board and the general manager of tourism to try to get them. So we should have some indications over the next week.
Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, a couple of questions, but can I just say on page 18, congratulations. I love the use of the word unconscionable. It's very Dickensian. Regard to Ticket Rocket. Further down the page, I met with Minister of Conservation in Key Stage on 31 July and discussed the Red Bill issue after convincing the Minister that we are not a community that just does not like wildlife. Is that serious? Was that seriously the view of a Minister of the Crown who came down here to talk about this?
I can imagine a level of cynicism by a Minister of Conservation. Probably gets lots of requests about, you know, what a nuisance wildlife is, and some of them probably quite unreasonable. But it was a case of actually, you know, we live alongside a lot of wildlife, and we actually treasure what we have. It's become increasingly difficult to treasure red-billed gulls by many of our residents, just because of the, you know, more than a nuisance, it's the destruction that they actually cause and the hundreds of thousands of dollars damage that they're doing. So I did have to just briefly flash those credentials as far as saying, you know, we love nature, but yeah.
Frankly, I'm just staggered that a Minister of the Crown should be so ill-informed or ill-advised and judgmental. I really am, seriously. She should have known better to actually infer that when she came here to talk to you. Seriously, in my view.
The task we have is giving her as much information on the situation as possible, and that's all being gathered as we speak. So that'll be useful.
Very quickly, did the funding from Canterbury, the Regional Council, are we now, you're on page 19, you're saying we could have been or may have been entitled to get an additional 3.7 million. Is the email yesterday, does that down to 3 million? And if so, is that confirmed or is that?
Because they've got to play nice to divide up the money. Councillor Fraser.
I've just going back to the red billed gulls. I think this is a major issue, and I concur with what Jim has said before. But I just asked the question on the last line, fingers crossed that common sense prevails. What would you say that meant? Mr. Mayor.
Well, definitely our fingers. Seagulls don't have fingers. Oh.
You meant toes would be crossed, or
well, basically, what we're asking the minister is to use the exemption that exists in the Wildlife Act to allow nests to be removed. In an extreme, it can allow protected wildlife to be culled. No, we're not asking for that. We're just asking, let us, you know, clear nests away. Don't. At the moment, if it's the beginnings of a nest, you know, before it becomes a nest, which is I'm sure there's a scientific definition on that one, then you can take away the bits of material. But once it becomes a nest, then you can't remove it. What we're saying is we need to be able to remove nests. We need to stop them from nesting on buildings. That will encourage them to go somewhere else and without the need to actually cull gulls.
So you're expecting reports back from business owners where this is occurring quite quickly, and if so, what time frame would you be suggesting? I think it's quite important for the business community where this occurs. So
yeah, so that's being worked on. We've had some reports to council. So the minister asked if we had reports, that we've seen those through and asking for anecdotal evidence from business owners as well. Obviously, Countdown most affected, or the most affected. And they've certainly spent over $100,000, and you know, it'd be good to get their perspective. But there's a lot of other business owners that are quite significantly affected as well, and the indirect costs are really difficult to measure. But people do stay away from some of those businesses at the moment because of.
thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Cooch. Just on the same topic, just to add a comment, I've been listening to a building owner who's been clearing his roof on a regular occurrence of seagull matter. He's now picked up with quite a serious skin irritation. And he's been told by his doctor he's probably picked it up from the seagulls. It's the source of it. So unconfirmed at this point in time, but just at the point that there may well be a health problem for the people who are doing the clearing as well as the buildings.
Yeah, having seen footage of, you know, some of the absolute mess, and you know, excrement and everything. Yeah, it's there. Blocking gutters, the flooding within buildings that causes. It's I think there's a lot of people who just had it.
In my case, this owner had a dead pigeon, a dead seagull down a drain pipe, of course. So yes, it was a blocked drain pipe and it was flooding. And yes,
I'll encourage them to just write a quick email about that. Shall we really appreciate it as well. Any other questions? Someone like to move the report be received? Councillor McGrovey, Councillor Newton. Those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Mr. Cowell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll take the report as read. I'm very happy to answer questions that people might have. There are one or two observations that I would make, though. One is that it's not unusual at the end of the parliamentary term to have quite a rush of legislation and lead up to the end of the parliamentary term, and this year has been no exception. So apologies for the number of items that are in here. Many of them are quite significant. In particular, the intention to replace the RMA is obviously of major import to council. Intention to replace it with 3 acts. One of those acts is the NBEA, or the Natural Built Environments Act, and it's interesting in that respect that one of the proposals in relation to that act is that the current 100 or so district and city plans around the country be reduced to just 14. And in relation to those 14 joint plans, that joint committees be established. And the particular thing that I draw your attention to there is that there's the intention to have joint committees made up not only of regional council representatives as well as districts and cities within each region, but also essentially 2 elements of central government participation as well. So representatives of central government, but there is a specific reference to the Department of Conservation through a ministerial representative representing the interests of the Department of Conservation. So there are some issues there in relation to that tension between localism and central control, if you like. So it'll be interesting to see how that legislation progresses. But very happy to answer any questions members may have.
Councillor McGrovey,
Thank you, Fergus. Not just with these changes, there's a note in here that these are quite major. I wonder what the resourcing and operational impact would be from these changes you mentioned. Staff have to come up to speed with various new legislation you mentioned. What do you see the implications?
Yeah, well, that's a very good point. I mean, I have mentioned for the last 3 years that staff have been put under enormous pressure, because these legislative changes are not just occurring now, they've been occurring from the perception of the new government. Of course, a lot of these changes are good. However, it does put quite a lot of pressure on staff to ensure that they are up to date with all of these changes that they're implementing. The community is aware of them, and the communications element of that is it's really quite heavy. In addition to that, though, we do have even further stress falling on the system at the moment in the form of our first COVID-19 Recovery Fast Track Consenting Act 2020 application in relation to the Upper Waitaki Lines application to central government. That's fast tracking legislation aimed at ensuring that major projects can proceed and that jobs can be encouraged during the post-COVID-19 shutdown. It does give our staff only 10 days to respond, and that includes, of course, all your input to the process as well. That notification arrived on Friday, so we're already almost pretty well halfway through the period available. So these things are statutory requirements, which means that BAU essentially gets placed on hold. That of course causes frustration on the part of members of the community who are trying to get their own consents through the process. So I would ask that councillors, give some thought to the stress that staff are under dealing with these things currently, because it really is quite a workload.
Just further on that. Obviously, there's going to be major implications on our district plan, or whether our district plan is even a plan for us. Are we feeding back into or asking questions? I guess it's probably more an LGNZ question around how that affects all those councils that are working through the district plan at the moment, and whether it's a resource well spent or whether it's going to be all thrown in the rubbish and started again, because the time and effort our staff putting into the district plan at the moment is insanely big, and we've got a massive workload ahead of us. And if it's all for nothing, it's going to be scrapped in 6 months or a year. We probably need to be kind of aware of that.
Well, it's a good question, but practically speaking, given the normal process in terms of development of legislation, I would anticipate that there's probably 6 years to go before something is actually brought into effect. Our plan is deficient in some ways, and we are all aware of that. So fixing some of those issues will help our community enormously and help good planning in the interim. But it is a discussion that local government in New Zealand will have.
And the joint committees, just to add on to that, where possible, if we can try and get some kind of place on the odd joint committee, I think having our voices heard at that level would be really helpful.
Well, my anticipation is that our participation in the joint committee will be automatic. What I'm really pointing out is that the nature of hearings panels, as we refer to them in the past, is changing, and that central government will have at least 2 seats at the table, which they have not traditionally had in the past. So it changes the nature of the decision making. And there is probably some very strong benefits in that, but it is a marked change in how planning is conducted.
LGNZ will inevitably be very closely involved with any changes to the district plans and how they're done. I would expect, though, that there'll be more of a morphing of plans. There might be some further common language used, although the new templates that are encouraging that. I think there's still an ability to have your own area's special elements recognised, but it will be just in one document. I would hope.
Yeah.
It is about, still hopefully going to be about local decision making, about what is special to us and what needs to be protected rather than someone else, Wellington or wherever, deciding for us. Councillor Percival and then Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, so Fergus, I acknowledge the stress that staff are under and the extra work that's been entailed by handing down the regulatory and legislative items from central government. But in my term here, over 6 years, it's been an ongoing thing, and it's been addressed by us by recruiting more staff to handle that situation. So even though work and stress is there and there's continual drop down from central government, we are addressing it in our staff. So why are we in a position where it's more stressful now when we are, as I say, addressing the problem by recruiting more people to handle it?
Well, I think the COVID-19 recovery fast track legislation adds a new element. Those time requirements are quite short. You're right. Council has quite appropriately increased staff resourcing to deal with some of these issues, especially district plan. And it's really pleasing that over the last 24 hours, the Heritage Environment and Regulatory Group has actually achieved for the first time 100% staffing complement, which is a real milestone. And that's really going to help that group. It's been under-resourced for quite some time for a number of reasons, primarily the difficulty of attracting planners in particular. It's a very competitive area throughout the country, every part of the country undertaking plan reviews simultaneously. I would hope that in the new legislation, some consideration would be given to phase shifting plan review into the future, so that not every part of New Zealand is attempting to do the same task at the same moment, because that places enormous stress on the availability of resources.
Yes, Hopkins.
Yeah, wish I could share your optimism about motives for this change in the RMA, Mayor Kirchhoff. In my view, it's further proof of, if you like, the arrogance of the centre. You know, we know best. And it's also, I think you and others have said that the water reforms are an attempt to amalgamate local authorities. And this is another, in my view, this is amalgamation by function. What we're seeing here is a proposal that is one of the most important, if not the most important thing any TLA, any district or city council can do. Create its own plan for its own people in its own space is being taken away from us. And instead of all the plans, we'll have 14 with the Crown, who can pull rank over anyone, and then regional councils who can pull rank over us. And we are there as a sort of, in my view, potential poor cousin. And we could well get steamrolled by ideologues and activists from further up the food chain who will be able to impose their rules on a whole range of autonomous and separate communities. And I would urge, I noticed you mentioned before there are roles that may be discussed later, and I would urge anyone who fills those roles to campaign vigorously on this matter and fight the good fight. But can I, Fergus, one other thing, just for a couple of very quick questions further on, looking at the urban policy statement, you mentioned on page 36 of your report, I'm sorry, that this will require councils to allow building heights of at least 6 stories in metropolitan centre zones. Now, given that metropolitan areas appear to be defined as anything over 10,000 pop, does that mean our new district plan is going to have to allow 6-storey buildings in order?
On the face of it, yes. But I defer to the planning team to answer that and get an answer.
That's how I read it too, and my blood ran cold. So if we can find that out sooner rather than later.
I would actually temper by saying that there are exceptions permitted based on the special nature of it.
Okay.
So it's not as dire as it might be.
But look, one other, through you, Mayor Kircher, if you'll allow, one other very quick question, or two, but perhaps the more important one. On page 39, the Mackenzie Basin Alignment Program. It now appears that Crown agencies in Takatawhenua wish to engage in dialogue regarding a widening of the relationship. This has been operational today, regarding a widening of this relationship to encompass governance. Can you tell us what that means, please?
Yes, this is an initial discussion that has been, well, an initial discussion point that has been raised by the Department of Conservation and LINS, and to some degree by Environment Canterbury, all of whom are actively engaged, and especially the former two, because they are agents of the Crown, therefore have a treaty relationship. They are engaged in elements of co-governance with in the past, the Mackenzie Basin Alignment Program has been very much a chief executive driven initiative aimed at making consenting processes easier, smoother, more integrated for people who need consent. And that work has progressed very well. However, there is now an expectation of a discussion about co-governance. Now, that's not a discussion that I am happy to have because that is not my role as chief executive. That's a role really for this table. And Mayor Kircher and I will be having a preliminary discussion with our Mackenzie counterparts on Friday to just begin that conversation about, well, what might this be or mean?
Right, so you don't know as yet what they mean by co-governance.
No, I mean, really, this is a matter that really needs to be workshop with you, and we're working on having the Crown representatives and Environment Canterbury workshop the matter with yourselves. That's done.
It's an interesting situation. Sarah and I talked about the difference between how the likes of DOC operate versus how councils operate. The councils have got very much that local government. DOC doesn't have that. They've got Wellington governance and they've got the conservation force or whatever they have around the country, but they do seem to set the direction quite a bit themselves, as opposed to a council where this team sets the direction. So yeah, we don't know how much is being driven from above versus within the department, but it'll be an interesting discussion, and I'll be happy to have that discussion rather than just being told about it. Councillor McGrovey, anything else?
Thank you, Mayor. Figures just a final one from me on page 38 regarding the National Climate Change Risk Assessment that's been done, and you make a comment in your summary at the end, given the document's only just been released, it's too early to advise what the implications are, but do you have any early understandings of what it might mean for Waitaki?
It's just too early, Councillor. Some of these things have literally arrived just in the last few days, and some pieces of it, and there's nothing wrong with this. Some pieces of legislation have been passed through the first, second, and third readings on the very same day.
Yes.
It's not unusual, given the end of the parliamentary term, but what it does mean is that the process where people can absorb and tease out the implications of proposed legislation is simply not there. And so, as I mentioned, in particular, our planning team is under a lot of pressure right now, and I probably need to give them a little bit of time to actually be able to absorb and report back and report back to you.
Do you have a potential time frame?
I would hope in the next 6 weeks.
Okay. Thank you.
Just a comment as much as anything on the national policy statement for development, where they're discussing the need in urban areas, so not needing car parks. And I think we had the opening of Mighty 10 bigger over the weekend, and I think for an area that doesn't really have good access to public transport, which is a discussion we've started to have with ORC about whether this is going to change things. But if we don't require new businesses of that scale to have car parking attached, and we don't have availability for our community to use public transport, we would have some dramas, would be my comment.
We can look at ways to incentivize it.
You are dead right.
That's right. Absolutely right.
And it is a bit ideologically driven, I believe, but you know, there will be businesses like that who see it in their best interests to have car parking, but there'll be equally ones that decide, well, they can set up shop, they can use 100% of the land to put building on, and it's going to be neighbours that then wear the impact of that. So it's Councillor Newton.
Thank you, Mayor Kuchar. Fergus, just wondering, under health and safety on page 42, there's an environmental note, one incident. Could you expand on that for us, please?
No, I can't, I'm sorry. I can get, I'm sure it's got something to do with red goals, but
it may have something to do with the environment.
I'll get something. We'll find out the answer. Council.
Okay, anything else?
Just one thing, thank you, Mayor Kuchar. I just want to say thank you for the report. That's one of the best I've read since I've been a councilman, and the time taken to actually give us the risks associated with the council and our roles is really appreciated.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, certainly having the focus on what's the impact for us on the different legislation and so on makes it all that much more relevant. I'll be moved. We receive the information. Those in favour say aye. Against, it's carried. Okay, moving on to 6.1 on page 5, recommendations from the Park Committee. Audit and Risk Committee.
Yes, I don't think it needs any further comment or advice, really, Mayor Kuchar. The Treasury strategy is one of ensuring that council does not put ratepayers' money at risk, but also the comment at the present time is that council at the present time doesn't have a surplus of money to invest. The council at the present time is a borrower rather than for the first time is we have a lot large amounts of money out on loan to the community organisations, but for our businesses that they're running, council has been borrowing money and recently joined the Local Government Funding Authority, LGFA, to require to obtain the money at the cheapest possible rate to reduce the cost to council. I'm happy to answer any more questions if anybody has any questions on it, but I'll be happy to move the resolution.
And Councillor McGrovey. Any further discussion? Just note we haven't joined the LGFA quite yet. We're in that process. Latest information is that the 4 sets of lawyers working on the documents have managed to hold it up a little bit longer, so it's probably going to come to an additional council meeting or some council meeting on the 22nd of September. Yet to be scheduled. Councillor Hopkins.
This is a comment more about our agenda than the resolution, which I'm happy to support. But if members of the public sort of see this, they might think, well, what was the strategy? Because, and I would just suggest that maybe we either include the original report to the committee as an appendix or a link that people can access just to read if they wish, as part of this agenda. Because otherwise, I mean, there may well be people who simply weren't aware of the previous committee's meeting or had read the report. So that's really just an information thing for the wider public.
Noted. Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, it's carried. Now on to 7.1, the lease of land at Hamden. The land referred to Cavish.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very simple report recommending that we do lease the land to the Hamden Group, and the terms are on page 54, which is a standard sort of community lease set of terms. So that's probably where the nub of the information is. And I believe Dougal and the group are happy with those terms in that report.
Any questions, first of all? Councillor Taverneau, you want to move that, and second Councillor Newton. Any discussion?
Oh, sorry, I did have a question.
Councillor Bingham, thank you.
Look, we heard from Dougal earlier on, and this is sort of a project that really excites me, because it's really good to see communities like Hendon doing things for themselves, and we just got to make it easier for them to do so. So well done, and keep up the good work.
Councillor Hopkins, you have a question, and then
just very quickly, Neil, is it the fact that there's no right of renewal? We've got the lease is for a maximum of 35 years, lease 1 day, with no right of renewal. Is that just a standard thing? So we might come the 35 years time, HCE and us may have a new conversation with a new lease, but
yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thanks very much.
because of the nature of it, if it's longer than that, there has to be a subdivision of the land.
Oh, we see. Okay.
So it avoids that. And there's no reason partway along where actually it can't be, and the lease can't be modified or, another term arranged at that time that suits both parties. I think you're in this for the long haul, Dougal.
Yeah, I don't know whether I'll still be here in 35 years, but
young fellow like you.
The way that the motion's written, we take it that we would be talking to Fergus about the details behind those, the rates and the $1 a year and all that sort of stuff. So as long as he's got the scope to negotiate a little with us, we'll refine it.
I don't think we're going to demand $1. So.
Oh, no.
I was about to donate the first $1.
I noticed it says if required.
You want it down to 50 cents.
So just so we're clear, so what we do is delegate to the chief executive. He'll then probably delegate down to the property manager. She'll be able to twist your arm harder.
She's difficult. I want to negotiate with Fergus.
That's noted. Okay, Councillor McRae.
No, I'm just very supportive of it.
Okay, Councillor Taverneau.
Just Mr. McTavish, just want to say a huge thank you, because I think so much of what's happened in Hendon over the last 10, 15, however many years has been driven by your group, and it's fantastic. And this year, it's not something we have that comes to us very often, where there is a group that really, really wants to see something happen, and they've gone out there and they're making it happen themselves, and I really appreciate that, and I think the community does. So really, really happy to support.
We're lucky with people down there.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to put the motion. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, it's carried. And thank you. All the best for the tough negotiation ahead. Certainly, it's been a pleasure working with you up to now. Big bits and pieces of getting it to this point, but my email address if there's any issue.
Yeah, thank you.
But no, all good. And wish you and the group all the best. For construction.
Yeah, thank you all. Wonderful. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, now let's move on to 7.2. Harbour plan. Just welcome one of the community representatives on the Harbour Area Community for Culture. Thanks for coming in. I'll just ask George to just introduce it, and George, if you want to say anything.
Yeah, thank you. We did actually invite the rest of the committee in for 10:15 and suggest them that we'll be discussing this at 10:30. So the other members of the committee may join us in about 5 minutes. So we could break for an early morning table and move to the next item.
Sorry, I just didn't realise that timing was there. No, we will hold off then. We will talk to that at 10:30 as scheduled, to make sure that the ones who come to do that. See what else we've got. Perhaps if we could just move to 7.5, the elections, we'll see how that discussion goes. The time for what be. I've got to check whether Bailey can speak to this one. Okay.
Right. So this is a fairly simple report. Obviously, the Local Electoral Act requires that local authorities consider the electoral voting system, and we're required to consider that now prior to the 2022 triennial elections and onwards. The program, the timetable required is set out in the paper. Obviously, we're considering the STV, single transferable vote, or the FPP, first past the post methods. And we currently, in the papers that we produce, we actually currently have a mixture of both, because the DHBs legally have to use the STV process. And there's, in the 2019 triennial elections, there's 11 councils that also use that process. What we are recommending here is that we consider today whether to retain the FPP or consider the STP, and then work through the process as set out in the paper that's required for that. I don't know if you have any questions, happy to answer them. There's quite a lot of reading material there to help outline the process that is required.
Councillors, any questions?
Fantastic.
There was plenty of reading material, as you said. Councillor Taylor?
I'm happy to move recommendation A.
And I'll second it in the future.
Recommendation A is that so council resolves to retain first past the post system.
Just speaking to that, if I may. I've had a lot of councils I've dealt with or talked to around who've used the STV system. They voters find it really confusing. It's not straightforward, and there's also quite a cost to council to look at a change right now. I haven't heard from our electorate any complaints over a pretty simple, easy to understand system. So I don't think we fix what's not broken.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, being a simple soul, I like simple systems. But when I saw in the news the other day that Dunedin was looking at going back to FPP, my heart soared. When I saw that they'd voted to stay with STT, my heart sank. Seriously, I would absolutely agree with it. I'd have happily moved this myself. I absolutely agree with Melanie. FPP is elegant, simple, familiar, and I believe STV is actually one of the reasons that in a decreasing number of people are participating in local government elections even the sort of complexity of the DHB vote will put some people off any voting participation. So no, let's stick with what we've got, unless there is a huge community wellspring, a tidal wave of demand for change, which I doubt.
Okay, any other speakers? Put it, those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. We'll now break for 15 minutes, convening at 10:30. Thanks very much. The endorsement of the draft harbour. So, Mr. Jorgensen, I'll ask you to make any comments as an introduction to the. And I'm sorry, also just welcome the 4 community members of the harbour area. Thank you for coming along. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's our pleasure to present the final draft version of the harbour plan for your hopeful approval today. So there's a lot of work that has gone into this document. We last had a workshop with the harbour area committee, and we went through the last version, and we made quite a few structural changes to the document so that it read a lot better, and hopefully is a lot more understandable by the community. The document is quite high level, and it's really trying to signal the direction that council would like to go in with the harbour projects and the future development of the harbour. Sitting underneath the plan, there are a number of work streams that occur, and where some of those will have more detailed consultation as part of those projects. For example, the district plan work will be having its own consultation process, which then feeds into what happens in some areas of the harbour. So the first thing we're asking for today is to approve the draft plan to go out for a final round of engagement with the community. There has been a lot of engagement with the community throughout this whole process, and that has been incorporated into the document. The second resolution is just around the actual engagement process itself, and that is listed on page 89 of the agenda. We're proposing quite a simple engagement because of the engagement we've already had, and it includes a 3-week engagement period. The key part of that is for those wishing to speak to their submissions and for the written submissions to be considered by the Harbour Committee in September, and then making a final recommendation to a draft document to come to council for hopefully final approval. It's me.
Just inviting any of the community members to make any comments if you like at this stage.
I'll probably make one. I think it's got to be kept as a very practical document. We have a bit of trouble with which bit of history we want to keep, because we've had a lot of history down there, steam trains, boats, lots of fuel stations. Now we've got what we've got. But it is a plan for the future, and it needs to be reviewable, and in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, things will be different. There'll be different people. If you think 30 years out, there's a lot of us won't be here, so we're a heap of different people. So we won't keep everybody happy, and I don't think we need to. It's about making sure that we've got a plan that's flexible and creates something that we can be proud of.
I'd just like to say I'm impressed with the new plan to go out to the public. I think you guys have done a great job. It's a lot easier to understand and read. So I'd just like to say thanks for the work you guys have done.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that. Anyone else? All good. Okay. Councillors, you have any questions to start off with? Councillor Hopkins.
Well, sorry, Mayor, this isn't. I do have a couple of questions about the public engagement, but just one very important thing about the draft, which I think we should change, on the vision page. I know this sounds very silly, particular, but if you look at the statement that's there today, what it reads is as follows: delivering benefits for all while, protecting and enhancing what makes the harbour area special. And I'm sorry, but the placement of the comma is completely wrong, and it is on the vision page. So it should be after all and not after while. So can we change that? Because it is an important page. But putting that said and that aside, I mean, there are things in the draft that I probably will make submissions along with other people. I think it can be simpler still. I love the fact that it is simpler than it was, and could still be simpler again. But are we allowed to talk about the consultation?
Yes. Well, you're allowed to ask questions at the moment.
Okay, I'm just wondering, can I ask Neil, why have we chosen 3 weeks? I mean, it's taken a long time.
Yeah.
It seems like I personally would like it to be a longer consultation period. So why have you gone for 3 weeks?
As I said at the start of the meeting, we've gone for quite a simple consultation process, and there's been quite a lot of engagement with a lot of different people throughout the process. And a 3-week period seemed to be appropriate for any final comments on the plan. So the plan does include a lot of feedback from everybody already. I guess this is just a final finishing touch, and yeah, it was thought that 3 weeks was about the right time, and it does feed into nicely to our meeting cycles as well, so we get the plan approved before Christmas. But if the council wishes for a longer period, then that's entirely up to you guys. Just pushes everything out a bit further.
I think part of it was actually looking at trying to fit it in with everything else that we have to do on as well, and the fact that people are coming from a reasonable base of information on as to what's coming through in the different implications of the plan. It's basically, it's pretty much a week before that consultation starts, and then 3 weeks from there. So there's, yeah, I don't think that that's, you know, tricky for people to have basically, you know, submissions in 4 weeks from now. And then obviously there's the hearing on the submissions after that point. Well, I think people, you know, I certainly hope people take the opportunity and have submissions.
Just a point of clarification, because this is being adopted by full council right now, and so any changes should be made right now and should be owned by full council. I wouldn't anticipate councillors making submissions to a council-led document. Isn't that what we deal with now?
Well, I'm not on the committee, so I haven't been able to have any input.
This is what today is.
Sorry?
My comment is that's what today is. Like we don't, we're not legally allowed to be part of other submission processes because it's our plan. So now and at the end of taking submissions is when we bring in our points of view, I would have thought. I'm just trying to clarify what the intention is.
Certainly, yeah, certainly council should be happy with the draft as council. And we certainly have the ability to make minor changes, like the comma change can just be made. But if there's something significant you as council are not happy with, then we hope that would have been raised before now. But if there is something there, then you're right, there's time to raise it. However, it is still just a draft, and there's the final opportunity and hopefully later in the year after submissions, if there's
I think council
something substantive.
And there's a collective responsibility element of this plan going out. And if a councillor is not comfortable with something, it needs to be raised now, and it needs to be discussed now, and it needs to be decided now as we move on, because we need to own this going out, not be arguing amongst ourselves. I think we've had plenty of options to feed into this, not just the harbour plan. And Councillor Hopkins, you've been at majority, if not all of those meetings and into that process.
Well, some of the things are just to do with style and layout. There are, if you were, there are words like tactical urbanism, holistic view, things like that that I don't think are user friendly. I probably would be slightly concerned about the statements we are making in this draft about the Sumpter Wharf. One of them on page 19, Sumpter Wharf needs to be repaired or it will eventually collapse into the harbour. Now, the only time we've ever tested the community's appetite to repair Sumpter Wharf, they told us quite resoundingly they didn't want us to do it. So maybe if that sentence said something like, if Sumpter Wharf is not repaired, it will eventually collapse. So the question is, so I'm just saying that things like that seem to presuppose a plan of action on our part. Equally on page 25, Sumpter Wharf is an essential part of the harbour.
Point of order, this is a plan. This is not a consultation document in itself. This is our plan, and that's what we want the community to comment on.
But you've just said you want us to actually...
Excuse me. Point of order has been raised. It's not a point of order, so clear that one out of order.
Thank you, Mayor Kuchar.
Just remember to raise points of order with the chair, not to the person you're raising order about. Just keep it simple. Thank you. Councillor Hopkins. The reality of the situation is that there has been the Harbour Area Committee, which has got a very good representation of councillors and community members on it. You've been at a lot of the workshops, including the last one, where you had quite a major contribution throughout the workshop, and there was a good opportunity for you to have a say on what's gone into the draft. What we want to do is test this community, not try and change a whole lot of stuff before we can test it. The changing has been happening, and we should have faith in each other and so forth. It might not be worded exactly the way you want. People can make submissions on it.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no problem with that at all. that there's an opportunity for us to see those submissions, make sure we're taking them into account, that we're happy with, that we're considering all of those views that are raised, and end up with a very good plan. It's not intended to be perfect at the moment, otherwise we wouldn't need to go submission.
No, I know. And I hadn't planned to make any comment about it today until I was challenged to do so.
So, any other questions?
Yes, the question on page 27 talks about the new roundabout in front of the caravan park, so to allow the rowing club free access across with their rowing skiffs to the harbour. It talks about this will result in the loss of 6 parking spaces. And I just look at the photograph there. I counted probably perhaps 13 parking spaces may be lost. So is that 6? Can that figure be checked to be shown that it is correct?
So yeah, the number in the document is correct. So it's being supplied by the roading team. So they've looked at it, and they have said that would only they can make it work with only a loss of 6 car parks in the area.
Well, just if you look at the photograph, Mr. Wilkinson, just go back to the entrance of the car into the caravan park and just count the car parks. There's all 6 or there.
So some of those will be retained. They may not be in the same location exactly, but that's
just as long as that figure is correct.
Yep.
Thank you.
Councillor Helen Levy.
Just a comment. I just wanted to congratulate the Harbour Committee for the work that you've done putting this plan in place. The first time that I saw it, I thought it was really good. Really appreciate the framework that you've used everything together to help us understand what the plan is moving forward. So thank you.
Councillor McRory.
Look, I agree as well. I think it's a very good document, and we've got to remember it's a draft document going out for consultation. I think it's a good document to go out for consultation on. And given my thoughts, I'll be happy to recommend move the recommendations 1 and 2.
Okay. Take that as a motion at the moment. Is there any other questions? Okay.
Yes, look, about the community engagement proposal, but Fergus may be able to tell me. We've got a timetable shown here, but we don't have any indication of what engagement we will be undertaking. Is it proposed that there be any advertisements in local newspapers? Will there be printed copies of the document available at libraries? Somebody has already raised today the question of printed documents, printed copies. So what are the particulars of communication of the engagement plan, please?
Yeah, I can probably answer that. So yeah, it's a relatively standard type engagement with the community. So it'll include the normal electronic and hard copy copies of things at libraries and etc. There'll be a media campaign, both electronically and in the paper, to let people know about this. So yeah, a standard, simple engagement process.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Will that be run through the comms?
Absolutely.
Team?
Yes.
Just suggest that just the comms councillors just have it run past them, just as a sounding board for that.
Okay.
Good. Okay. Right. So moved and seconded, Councillor Holden. Thank you. Right. Any discussion?
Wondering if I could move them.
Councillor Tavendale. Councillor.
This has been a massive undertaking, and I think that councillors have had fairly, like a huge number of opportunities to pitch into this and have their voices heard. So the document in front of us is a mix of all our voices, and there's compromises in that, and there's assumptions in that as well. And I think we've come out with something that the community, with what they've come to us with originally, is going to be quite comfortable with. And I know, reading through it, I'm really comfortable with it. It doesn't solve all the problems in the world, and we are still going to have discussions at times as to how we're going to fund this. how am I going to make that happen? And that's going to happen through our other plans, but we're setting a direction here as to what we find important and what we want to see money spent on now and into the future to hold on to, and what things are potentially not quite so important. So it's ranking things, and it's giving people an indication of where our priorities lie, and testing the water on with the community to say, do our priorities match your priorities? And I think it is a really good document, and I think it's quite accessible to people to understand, and it's easy. So I hope that our community get in behind it, go through it and tell us what they think.
Yeah, just to reiterate what's probably already been said, but thanks to the joint external members that come on and put the work in, and it was probably one of our most successful community engagements, the amount of responses we get to it, which is sort of testament that it's a pretty valued place. And I think, yeah, like Mel said, it's a combination of everyone, the committee, councillors and the community coming together for the best outcomes. I'm happy to endorse it today.
Yeah, certainly there has been very much a long process, but a very joint effort with a lot of people involved, and thanks to the project team and to the other members of the committee, and especially the community members who have come in a number of times to be part of the discussions and the decision making as to what the draft looks like. I do think we've got something that absolutely keeps the tone of the place, which I think is something that's important to a lot of people, and we'll soon find out whether we got that right or not. There will be elements which some will like, some won't like, but one of the important things is, as mentioned earlier, things like the farmers market area, the work that's gone into liaising with them and getting agreement with them about exactly what space they need to future-proof themselves, and knowing where literally the line in the car park currently is for that. Those are all important things, and I just thank everyone who's been involved for getting it to this draft stage for consultation, and I really look forward to hearing submissions in due course. So anyway, any other speakers? Put the motion. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. George. Appreciate your work. Thanks, team.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. See you later.
Okay, councillors, we now move to 7.3. Stay there. Another major piece of work that I think had to be squeezed into a much shorter time frame in the harbour area. So I'll hand over to you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you. As Mayor Kuchar alluded to this morning in his Mayor's report, the Three Waters service reform is underway and is being the subject of some attention over the last few while. This report is the start of some formal decision making as part of the Three Waters Services Reform Programme. And as Mayor Kuchar said, the government has made some funding available. 3.73 million is available to this council as of right upon signing this MOU. And then there's a further 3.66 million available through the regional process should 2/3 of councils in the region sign up to this program as well. So what this MOU we're looking at today is it's a non-binding MOU, and what it asks council to do is, one, participate in the Three Waters reform process, which is having discussions with our neighbouring councils about how a different water structure could work and how waters could be delivered differently. And the second part is that it asks us to supply information to the reform process as well. So we're not quite sure what that information requirement will be yet, but it is be around asset data, what we spend, how we do it, and all probably covering the entire range of our delivery program for the Waters area. So the second part, so that needs to be signed by the end of August, sorry, by the end of August to have access to this money. So the government has made it clear if you don't sign up, that's fine, you'll miss out on the first tranche of money, but you can sign up later and potentially be eligible for future tranches of money should they make more funding available. The third part, I suppose, of this proposal is the development of a delivery plan. And that delivery plan outlines the work that we propose to do as council to spend that money. And it does need to be targeted towards some key objectives, which is basically stimulate investment, assist economic recovery through job creation, maintain investment in water infrastructure renewals and maintenance is kind of the main thrust of that funding. So that delivery program needs to target those areas, and I've also said it needs to be net new spend in the current financial year. So if we've already budgeted for it in this financial year, then it needs to be additional work over and above that. However, you can bring work forward, which you've got in future years. So the time frame for that approval of delivery plan is the end of September. So we do have a bit of time. However, we're suggesting that we consider this on the 25th of August at the additional council meeting as a first stage. The government has also said if you can get your applications in sooner, then they would appreciate that and may well release the funding earlier as well, which means we can actually get the work underway. The time frame to spend the money is quite tight. So they are wanting works to really be committed to by the end of March next year, and then there's 12 months to spend it. So if we can get the program approved earlier, then it gives us another month basically to get the works underway. There will also be a regional process to go through to access the second part of the money. So sooner we've got a program ready and we can feed into that regional program, it probably helps us to move forward. So those are the aspects of the resolution. That the funding agreement referred to in resolution 1 is quite a relatively operational technical document, which just fits behind the MOU and basically just outlines how we receive the money, which is essentially we get half once the government releases the first tranche to get that quite early. So we sign the MOU, and once they're happy with our delivery plan, that money will get released, and we get the second half a little bit later once works are signed up and actually been actioned in the delivery plan, is my understanding. So I think that's a pretty broad outline. There's a lot of information on the DIA website, which people can access, providing further background. We'll do my best to answer any questions, but exciting times.
Yes, I have two. First one, Neil, with the time-frames and the delivery plan to get the 3.73, how confident are you of meeting the time-frames with what you're working on at the moment? With that, given we've got to sign this roughly on the 31st of August, we've got still time after that.
Yes.
Are you confident that the delivery plan will be based for that second date?
Yes.
The team is able to really get everything else at time.
Yeah, so the team's working on the delivery plan at the moment,
right?
And the agenda deadline for the 25th of August is midday Friday this week. So that delivery plan will need to be, well, the first draft for discussion with you will need to be finished by then.
Okay, the second question is just to explain a little more about the 3.66 regional contribution. I just don't quite understand that.
Yes, so as Mia Kuchera talked about this morning, there's $100 million has been allocated to the Canterbury region. So we've been placed in the Canterbury regional councils. 50 million of that is allocated on a 25% land and 75% population basis as a right to each local council. The remaining 50 million sits in a regional pot and needs 2/3 of councils in that region to sign up to the MOU to then be available for the region to distribute how it sees fit. So that will be done under the Canterbury Mayoral Forum, will be the body that approves where that goes. There's a meeting today, I think, Mayor Kircher, on, or shortly, on how that might work. The Canterbury region is suggesting that $1 million be put aside of that 50 million for use by the region, and the remaining 49 is then split as on the same ratio that the original 3.73 was split, which for us means 3.66, that second part.
Yeah, getting the three waters mixed up between regions. It's the Otago meeting today.
Ah, right. Yeah.
The Canterbury meeting is on Friday, exactly the same time we're starting a up in Mackenzie on major issue here. So Deputy Mayor sitting in on that Zoom Friday. Right. Got Councillor Milmine next, and then Councillor Taylor and Councillor Hopkins.
After attending the session in Timaru recently, it seemed like it's definitely a no-brainer to be progressing at this stage. However, I just am interested. I mean, there's certainly an element of mistrust out there and what's going on. So I'm just interested in hearing if you've got any amongst your networks at executive level, just is there any sign of anyone who is thinking of not going ahead with this tranche 1 MOU?
Yeah, so I'm not aware from an officer perspective that officers would be recommending to their councillors not to proceed with the first tranche. And you've had a number of discussions, both Canterbury and Otago wide, and that's certainly the consensus from the officer point of view. And a large driver for that is that it's been made very clear it's a non-binding MOU. And so by signing up to the first tranche does not commit you to staying in the program for the next phase. So the key decision point is probably about this time next year, when the second phase or second tranche may become available, and that's when council being asked to make it as a final decision on this process. So that's what we're being told at the moment.
Yeah, just to expand on that, it's certainly being sold that there's no fish hooks. There's still a few unanswered questions though, so we do have to be just mindful of them. I don't think the reasons not to go ahead. One of them is that the FAQs is a question on will central government have any ownership of the Three Waters assets. It's not intended that they would overall, but they may take a shareholding based on the stimulus funding that's provided along the way. So for us, that would mean if we're talking roughly $7 million, it would be about that percentage of whatever our total water assets are, which are, do you know what the total?
Mr. Hope is probably better. I think it's about 150 million-ish. A bit light. The value of the Three Waters assets.
It's closer to 200.
Yeah, somewhere between 150 and 200 million.
So it'd be about 4% if that was the case. So that question hasn't been answered yet, but that's possibly one of the ramifications. But it is still such a moving beast, really. It's fundamentally the issue. Councillor Tavendale.
I get that there's no real fish hooks in the memorandum of understanding, not binding. I'm guessing the funding agreement and delivery plan will be a bit more binding, especially as we're taking funds. We haven't seen that. Have you seen those at this stage?
So the funding agreement, yes. I think that's on the DIA website now. It was included in one of the presentations, which I think has been uploaded. They are quite good at uploading the latest information. So if it's not there, it shouldn't be too far away. But that's just really around the requirements to receive the money. So there doesn't seem to be anything in that.
You don't have any red flags that are coming out of what's required in that?
No. And then on the delivery plan is certainly binding as far as you need to do what you say you're going to do in the delivery plan. Yeah.
Sorry, through the chair, the information that's being requested that we don't necessarily know what we're going to have to provide at the state, and yet we've got an unbinding memorandum of understanding. I just want to understand if you guys have any concerns around information that you may not currently collect, whether there's going to be any anticipation that we should have that information and the implications of that. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, there may be some instances where we haven't collected data on, so we may not know all our asset, all the condition of our pipes, for example. Might have some data, but not all of it. My understanding was that we would only be providing what we have, and we certainly wouldn't be going out and doing a whole lot of testing, for example, to gather information. Could be wrong, but my understanding is that we would only be providing information that we have, very much like a Lagoima process, where if we don't have the information, we're not obliged to provide it. So I think it would be following that type of process.
And just around the regional funding, I'm guessing if up to 3/4 do sign up, but not everyone signs up, does that mean that the level of funding to the other members in the region goes up?
So that's definitely a question on people's minds, and I don't think that answer has been provided yet. Technically speaking, it appears the $50 million is being provided to the region to distribute, and if some councils didn't sign up, on the face of it, it seems like it would be up to the region to distribute that money to the others, perhaps, but I don't think that conversation's been had yet. I'm not sure if anyone would be willing to have that conversation until such a time that actually happened. I don't know, Nikitsha might have some other insights into that. But
certainly that's one of the things. If councils just don't opt in, does the money get redistributed to the ones that do? No one's answering that question at the moment. As Mr. Jorgensen said, I think anything in that regional pool could be redistributed, but if it's just not taken up in the first place, the 50% in the first part won't necessarily be shared out. So we'll see what happens. I mean, but it's hard to know if anyone is going to actually say no to money conditions at the moment, but you just never quite know. We've got Councillor Hopkins next.
Yeah, look, there may be no fishhooks in the MOU, but I think there are a couple of assumptions that I find unacceptable and or problematic. But comment on those when we approve the recommendations. At the moment, Neil, I've got a couple of questions. It would seem to me logical that we would actually vote on number 3 of these recommendations before we did 1 and 2. In other words, we'd say, we've got a good program of works, delivery and so on, we're all happy with that. So on that basis, we will sign the MOU. But is that am I wrong in that assumption?
So from our point of view, there's no point doing number 3 if you haven't signed the MOU, because those are the things we need.
Okay, so if we agree today for the mayor and the CE to sign the MOU, and then find on the 25th of August that the program of works is just going to impose too substantial an annual OPEX cost in addition to whatever the CAPEX might be that being paid for, can we then advise that we're not interested in, we're withdrawing our support for the MOU?
I don't see any reason why you couldn't. There's nothing I've seen that says you can't. Whoops, we made a mistake. We want to opt out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
I think we're talking theoretical.
Yeah.
Well, no, I understand that.
The work that the team's done already is, it's coming together. What I want to foreshadow is with number 3, just appointing several councillors just to work with the team before the 25th, so that you know, we've got some input you know, into this part of the process. But you know, from what I've seen, very brief look I just got before, is that we'll be well on track to identify what are the key things that we should be spending money on, and going to get the best bang for the buck and spread the money as carefully and effectively across the district as possible.
I'm pleased to hear, if I may, through you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Hope may be able to help us here as well, or Mr. Power. I'm pleased to hear you say that, because if you take the old adage, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Yes, we get $7 million of capex, but what's the annual additional OPEX? What will ratepayers have to pay additionally and earlier than they would have otherwise if we're bringing work forward? Do you see? I mean, it could have a considerable impact.
Fundamentally, it depends on what we're spending it on. Most of the things will, you know, I'm going to make this comment. Most of the things, if it's renewing pipes and so forth, is actually going to save us money, because we're going to stop leaks and things. If we're fixing a pump or upgrading, that's going to run more efficiently, and so potentially could be saving a bit of power, pump better, whatever it might be.
Right.
So generally, I think the operational expenditure is going to be unaffected for most things, but I think that's part of developing this the whole program of work.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that is probably just a signal, though, that how do you look, if this is going to make a difference into the future, then make sure we get that message on, you know, when we get delivered the program work document. So yeah, that's fine. It's probably only if there's major upgrades, something
Size, yeah.
You know, in size of pipes or whatever, that'll affect depreciation rates, but the rest of it actually is really going to save us money. Good. Councillor Waldstein?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Kircher. Just a question there on, in terms of your program of works, delivery plan and procurement plan, that's approved by council and it goes to government. If government were to rule some of that plan out and rule some of those projects out, would that reduce the amount of money that council could receive, or would we have a second chance to go back and?
I would almost certainly have a second chance. So it's just making sure we meet those initial timeframes.
Right.
We'll be trying hard to make sure we don't recommend something that doesn't meet their criteria.
Okay.
But if there is, generally they're quite good at coming back and saying, look, that one doesn't work, provide something else.
That's good. Good to hear. Thank you for that.
Councillor Kingan?
Are you ready to accept the motion?
I just want to ask one question, and then Councillor Percival will see you. Just on the planning for this, you know, we're going to have right across New Zealand another 700 million on top of everything else that's already being spent on. It's going to be spent. We're all going to be looking for contractors, buying pipe, pumps, whatever it might be. What sort of planning is there around procurement and making sure we're not going to end up paying over the odds for what we're getting, just because we're all trying to get it at the same time?
Yeah, so as part of the procurement plan, we are talking to our local contractors to assess capacity, and part of the reason of trying to get in a little bit earlier is then if we're ahead of the game a little bit, then we have a better chance of being able to secure our contractors at a good rate. We have a good history of knowing what competitive rates and what things cost to go on the ground and do work, and they'll soon be using those as benchmarks for money for work that we do moving forward. So we'll be looking to get reasonable sized contracts out as soon as we can, so that the contractors know what work we are wanting done and then can commit to that and lock that into their systems. So yeah, it is going to be quite important to move quite quickly and then get that procurement started so that contractors have got certainty about how much work we can give, what type of work, and for what period it's for.
Okay. I'll foreshadow a motion, but if you'd like to move 1 and 2,
Councillor Percival.
Oh, sorry. did that
Yeah,
again.
as Kelly said, it's a no-brainer. It takes something for nothing. There's always a hook in it somewhere. But I just look at the big, to me, the big picture. We've had all this information given to us. We've read piles and on this. We've been to workshop, road shows, the whole 9 yards. This giving away 700 million as grants, you know, across the board, across the nation, to me, is just the government investment into projects using us as a pack horse to do things that they'll ultimately take over anyway. So we just got to take advantage of what we're doing and get into what we've got. But the ultimate aim for those that are driving it is to nationalise the whole thing. So we're in a position where we can do what we want to do our own improvements and get on with it. But in the long term, we're going to lose the whole system. In my opinion, and what I can gather from what we've been told. We'll see.
And so,
The question is,
do you agree?
if you can't find a question,
What you have to do is ask Neil if he agrees.
exactly.
Councillor King, would you like to move 1 and 2?
Yeah, I'm prepared to move 1 and 2, and in doing so, I mean, this is a grant, it's not a loan. And I can't see that any district will opt out of this. I really can't at this stage. And so therefore, it's all been said, it's a no-brainer. At this stage we're in, how it's going to be in the future, quite figure that one out yet. But in the meantime, we've got to take advantage and progress the district with some money that's all of a sudden come from heaven or something. Wellington.
Well,
Taxpayers.
Taxpayers.
Taxpayers. Yeah.
This is part of the debt we're all going to be paying. So that was moved, Councillor King. Councillor Timmendale.
We've had a bit of a discussion on this previously, but around this whole picture of this and whether we move to something that's more nationally owned or owned in South Island or whatever it is, however that all works out, we need to understand our position at the moment really well, moving forward, like what we have in reserves, what we have in depreciation that our community currently holds, and have that discussion about whether we don't know at this stage whether that's going to be safe money that's going to stay here in the community, but chances are it may not, and we need to have a big discussion governance-wise as to if we deal with that, how we deal with that, and what that means for us.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, speaking to this, I said I had a concern about some of the matters in the MOU. I'll vote for this today because we can opt out later if we wish. But I just foreshadow or flag that there's not just financial matters at stake here. I notice on page 110, one of our agenda in response or information in response to frequently asked questions, the Crown is saying what we will be formally engaging with iwi throughout the reform program to understand the treaty rights and interests as they relate to reform. However, we encourage council to remain engaged with their iwi partners throughout the journey as well. And I would just foreshadow that I can see that becoming contentious and potentially litigious, not perhaps here, but elsewhere in the country. I can see that becoming a contestable matter because it then raises the issue of who has quote unquote rights to water. But if you go back to the two things that concern me about the MOU are on page 96, it says the parties shall promote a relationship in their dealings with each other based on mutual trust and respect. Well, I'm sorry, I don't think there is respect because the Crown has essentially imposed a formula on us that they want and we don't. And they're essentially sweetening the deal with money. But if you look on page 97, by signing the MOU, we agree to work together to identify an approach to service delivery reform following the design, with the following design features as a minimum, that water service delivery entities of significant scale most likely multi-regional are created as statutory entities. Now, that's not something we've said we want. Local government has said, no, Guy said it now, it's nationalisation. And it is, it's taking away a crucial part of our function. There's no respect in an MOU that says this is what you're going to sign up to because we think it's the best idea. I will support it today because we can opt out, but people, communities, people who drink the water today from the taps and the pipes we supply need to understand that's what's going on, in my view.
The MOU is online.
Yes, I know. Yes.
And it's certainly local government New Zealand's position on behalf of all councils that there are some key criteria that that are part of the process. Now, they haven't all been agreed to by the by government, but certainly one of the things is being able to choose to opt in, and that's certainly the case at the moment. The other is that there is choice along the way. The issue with this one is, as you state, all that's being asked is that we consider the following design features as a minimum. So it doesn't say we have to adopt them as a minimum.
Okay.
I don't want to understate the actual battle has still got to be had on that because it will be a battle. There is some fundamental, almost ideology at play based on the cost of delivering water to Auckland, the cost to deliver to metros, and the increasing cost as you go to provincial and into rural councils. I think, I've said a number of times before today, I think our team have done a really good job of getting cost-effective ways of delivering quality water to our ratepayers. And, we've done that well. So as far as our drinking water supplies, that's good. Our wastewater supplies are generally very good, certainly a lot better than many councils. The standards are going to increase. We're going to have to do more work right across New Zealand on that one. But, where we are today is stormwater. It's a bit of an issue for everyone. Some people refer to it as 2.5 waters rather than 3 waters. Stormwater is such an unknown at this stage. There's still standards developed on that. For us, it's really sure that we have the best supplies that we can. It's a good opportunity actually to say, one of the numbers that keeps getting pulled out by government and others is the 800,000 or 1 million, depending on who's saying it, consumers who are on unregulated water supplies. The reality is that the great majority of them are on council supplies, they're not private supplies. And there's a chunk of money, I think $30 million has been allocated to private supplies out of 761 million. So that's another element. Actually, we're not really part of the problem when we talk about problems. We have catching up to do, no doubt, but this is going to help us to do that. And our team has done a very good job up to now, and I'm sure they'll continue to do a sterling job. So anyway, it's just a bit of feedback on that one. Anyone else want to speak to the questions? Okay, I'll put it. So this is 1 and 2. Those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Those against, that's carried. And now go to number 3. I'll move. So the wording as it is there approves the development of a program of works, a delivery plan, and a procurement plan for the works to be considered at the 25th of August 2020 additional council meeting, and appoints councillors Kingan, McRovey, Newton, and Deputy Mayor Tavendale to assist in that work, subject to their availability. So, second, Mayor Tavendale, thank you. Reason for moving that. The team is getting on and pulling all of the information together. They do have a tight time frame. That's why it's subject to availability. It's just, they're not having to wait because someone's not available, but hopefully do things by email and so forth as well. But that we have a good representation from around our table as that program of work is developed, and that we feel comfortable. And then some people who have a better understanding does come to us on the 25th how it's got to where it is and so forth, and can speak from the government's perspective on that. So just double check, Mr. Jordan, you're happy with that wording?
Yeah, absolutely. That'll be useful for us, particularly given the tight time frame. So we'll probably need to organise some sessions operationally tomorrow and Thursday morning, probably.
There goes, Councillor King.
Yeah, look, I support it. I think it's probably quite good to have it well and truly teased out by the 25th. It is the 25th.
Yeah.
25th of August, so that we've got something that's really.
Yeah, that's the idea. Is one panel beat something too much on 25th. It's a lot of a panel beat. We just have to give it a spray paint and away she goes. Okay. No sporting puns. I'll put that if there's no other speakers. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? It's carried. Thank you very much. And Mr. Jorgensen and your board team.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. We now go to item 7.4. Request from. Oh no. Joining us for that.
Yes, we do.
So we've got a few minutes before we've got scheduled. Mark Rogers, Chair of Waitaki Health Services Limited, and Paul Ellison from the board. She's going to join us soon. On that coming.
I guess we could possibly start on the local government annual general meeting agreement.
Yes. We can get 4 minutes. See how we go with those. So the remits, normally in the past, so either the delegates have made decisions on the day at the AGM, or more recently, it's the remits have been just workshopped. This time round, what we want to do is do it in public. So the remits, there's 11 of them. They've come from different councils to LGNZ, and they'll be voted on the 21st of August at the AGM. So what we want to do is develop what our position is, and so without taking too much time, we'll see how we go. So each one is stating a particular position, and what I want to do is see if there's anyone who wants to speak against that. Obviously, we can also abstain on something, particularly if this doesn't affect us and we have an opinion on. So that it's quite fine in most situations. So what I'll do is we'll go to the first one, public transport support. So LGNZ acknowledges the government recognition during COVID of transport as an essential service, and basically goes on to say, carry on giving support, please. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, look, trouble is a lot of these are motherhood and apple pie. Personally, I would vote for bullet points 1, 2 and 3 quite happily. But if you look at number 4, it's a non sequitur, it's an oxymoron. Calls on the government to work with councils to maintain the financial viability of public transport. Well, the more you have to pump taxpayer or ratepayer money into public transport, the less it's financially viable. I mean, that's like saying, the government has to help a shop because it's not selling enough of whatever stock it has in stock. So I just think that last one just indicates that public transport is one of those sort of virtuous things.
Given that we don't have any,
I know,
subsidised public transport, is this one where an abstention would be appropriate?
Yeah, perhaps so. Yes, perhaps you're right.
Okay. Move on to the housing affordability.
Luke, are you able to explain to us what inclusionary zoning means, and does that affect us? Because that was the only question I had.
We had that come to us from the Queenstown and Lakes Trust, then they came and spoke to us about the housing. So basically it's the idea that you can require, if people are building like a big new subdivision, that a portion of that land is put aside for affordable housing. And so you can either choose as a community to sell that. It's probably a community trust you look at for something like that there, or whether they build on it. So we can have community housing starting to be funded partially by sale of subdivisions and things.
Right. Well, my thought was, why does anyone have to call on the government to pass legislation?
Because they've taken the inclusionary zoning out currently, and so they're asking for it to be put back in because they're finding it is actually a very useful tool.
Was it taken out in the last tranche of amendments in the RMA?
So are we for it or not?
Yes, basically, yes.
Does anyone want to speak against? Okay, for that one. Okay, we've got our yes for the district health services limited item are in waiting room, about to join us. So we'll now go back to that.
117.
Page 117.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's 3 separate but related items included for your consideration today. Really all matters that have been discussed previously, so I won't talk too much. Obviously welcoming Paul Ellison representing the Health Services Trust and Mark Rogers representing Health Service Limited. They are 2 of the 5 entities involved really in this item. So the first one was something that was contemplated when council put in the new lending arrangement with the Observatory Village. The second is really an ongoing issue supporting health services. And the third is just really amending the statement of intent to remove a bit of a stray sentence that has been in there for some time, but really isn't relevant to the relationship between Health Services Limited and council, and would actually sort of prohibit health services taking advantage of an offer that council has made in the past. So yeah, hopefully that's all covered in the background. I'm not sure if either Mark or Paul wants to speak, but certainly I think all 3 of us would be happy to answer any questions on any of the items.
So welcome, Mark and Paul.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary. I'm happy to take the papers as read, to be honest, but happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Right, we'll go straight to questions. So, councillors, any questions? Councillor Devendale?
It might be more for Paul, but talking, sorry, Paul Hope, not page 119, we're talking about removing the section saying council is not permitted, required to provide guarantee, indemnity or security, rather. Talk about that not being relevant because it only applies to council controlled trading entities. Can you just explain that a little bit more to me, because it seems an uncomfortable thing to delete. It's not sitting right.
Well, sorry, council could choose to keep it there, but if it was a CCTO, it would be required to be there. So it's actually a choice between the 2 entities, whether it's there or not. Again, this is sort of rather strange relationship of an SOI that it is the company's, council can't absolutely dictate, but generally these have been agreed on a pretty amicable basis. It was actually an issue raised by the auditors that they would, you know, council has previously indicated that they would ensure that health services carried on and addressed any going concern issues, and the auditors just highlighted that clause could prohibit that arrangement taking place. So it seems like it's easier to address it. There would still need to be a decision about it, which is in here, and then a more specific decision if a specific call for assistance actually took place.
Just through the chair, number 4, around providing support to ensure solvency. Do we have an idea of what risk that is exposing council to? Level of risk?
Well, I'd assess it at relatively low risk at the moment. I think Mark might actually be a better one to comment on that in terms of, they're putting in place a recovery plan. They're having ongoing discussions with the DHB, with ACC and other funders, and I think the board is increasingly confident about, as noted in the letter, about getting to a good position by the end of this year, and then a sort of a solid trading position after that. So, Mark, sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. Those points are all correct. We are forecasting through to the end of June to be in a break-even cash position. So after depreciation is taken into account, and moving forward, then starting to go into surplus as well. So we seem to be turning a corner. COVID did have an impact on us in terms of recruitment timeframes. It's pushed out a bit, but progress is being made at the moment.
Is that including assumptions around locums and recruitment?
It is, but some of those assumptions within the forecasts are actually based on signed contracts as well. So we've got one permanent doctor coming on next week, another one coming on in November, and then in negotiations with another 2 at the moment as well. So some of the assumptions are based on signed contracts having come to fruition.
Fantastic, thank you.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, get my head around this. You want the 700 until next June, 700,000 till next June.
We had the 700,000 and we've spent it, so we'd like the ability to hold the repayments back until June.
So basically, you don't want to have to repay us any of that 700,000 until June 2021. Oh, that's fine. Okay.
Correct. That's all. Yeah, we're not looking for any more money.
No. Okay. Right. Can I look? Just the other big question. If you look at your letter to the mayor, this is from Paul. Basically saying that you want $1 million from the village for operational purposes. Now, isn't that, people often say government shouldn't borrow to pay the groceries. Isn't that what you're doing here? Aren't you taking $1 million essentially to pay for the groceries, and not only for the groceries, but groceries you've already bought?
Two points in relation to that. One is the current request is for 500, and I need to try and maybe have a discussion around clarity of whether or not, because the recommendation is for $1 million, which is the projected figure for the year, and that 500 does cover operational costs, but it also covers some equipment costs which we've been brought to our attention are absolutely essential and are critical, and components of the business recovery plan. And those are consistent statements to what we made to the executive committee when we met with them earlier this year, where there was comfort around that direction of travel.
So Paul, are you, sorry, Mr. Chair, are you confident? I mean, if there's $1 million operational shortfall this year, and yes, you get, or 500,000, and yes, you get that money from the village, are you absolutely certain there won't be an equivalent whole OPEX hole next year when there won't be 500,000 from the village? I mean, are you certain? I mean, how close are you to getting a deal with the DHB?
Okay, so there's two things here. One of them I should let Mark answer, because that's the company, and I'm looking after the trust. So at the moment, subject to approval today, the trust have agreed in principle for 250,000 to go across to the company and they have got a plan that they've sent to us in which that has been agreed in principle by the trust. The remaining 250 of the 500 will be decided on a case-by-case basis on depending on what's that needed for. And into the future, further money from the Observatory Village will be considered on a case-by-case basis. Mark's probably better to answer the one regarding SDHB because he's chair of the company.
So when I spoke about the forward cash flow projections before, it's not a flatline basis. So effectively, we're looking to dip into cash through to February, which is the low point of the projections, and then it starts to come back up again. So there's the short-term cash flow requirement for operational while it turns around, is basically where we're coming from there. And then the additional regarding capital as part of the 5-year capital plan, the annualised aspects of that as well. Southern DHB, we've actually we've had the contract negotiations with them, so we forecast out 2% increase within our budgets, and it's come back in at 2.8%. So we're anticipating when we update the forecasts at the next meeting, we should have a 90k increase in our forecast as well.
Excuse me, Mark, your volume's quite low when it's coming through, so you might just have to hold the microphone up a little bit.
Okay, I'll speak up too.
Yeah, you're such a quiet wee fella.
Did you pick up on that though?
Yeah, I did, but I suppose the bigger question is, you and Paul are saying today, oh look, the recovery's taking longer and we're pushing that date back. And what certainty can we get from you guys, and what certainty can the community get that this recovery that's always being postponed and pushed out and pushed further out, what assurance can we have that it's going to happen?
Oh dear.
Faith in your directors, Jim. About it.
Pardon?
It's, at the moment, faith in your directors.
Right.
I think there's slightly more. I think it's slightly more than that, Mark. I think there is some signs there which you've outlined before. There's increased funding from different sources, and there's decreased costs. So when they start to align, the deficit is considerably reduced, and we're actually seeing some early signs of that.
Thank you, Paul.
I think also the board has certainly raised the issue that it is the cost of funding locums that have been really creating most of this issue. So the recruitment that Mark talked about is an important development, and I think as noted in the public gallery this morning, New Zealand has probably increased its attractiveness as a place for medical professionals. It's probably just an issue of perhaps getting them in the country, but certainly I think there will be a net inflow of suitably qualified people over the next couple of years that will help relieve this issue both for the Waitaki and the country in general.
Councillor Wallstein and Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Kircher. Yeah, probably, well, a question to you both. Maybe resolution number 2 approves repayment of up to $1 million by the Observatory Village Group to WD Health Services Trust in accordance with the loan agreement. So that would read to be a loan agreement, a loan repayment. Then going to your letter, Paul, I find it, your email to Mayor Gary. You talk about funds available to repay a $500,000 instalment of its loan back to the trust, but the trust has made WDHS Limited has made me aware it's proposing to submit an application to the trust for a donation of $500,000, pending authorisation by the elected members of the Waitaki District Council. So can you clarify why the resolution states a loan payment of $1 million, but then this letter states 500,000 loan and 500,000 donation?
Yes, I'll be happy to do that. There's a projected funds available for repayment of the loan in this financial year of $1 million. That was to be drawn down in 2 tranches, one at the early stages of the financial year, which we're in now, and one in the second half of the financial year, somewhere between January and June next year. Observatory Village has made me aware that there is now the first instalment of that repayment of the loan available of 500,000. We could request from council, and I'd like to do that, in principle, to give us permission to draw down the second one when and if that becomes available in the second half of the year as planned. But at the moment, they've only advised us that there's 500,000 available. There's the intention that another 500,000 becomes available, but we haven't had official notification at this stage that it is available.
So the clarification, though, Paul, of loan repayment or donation.
Right.
So it's a loan repayment. It's a loan repayment from Observatory Village to the trust. The donation that's referred to would be from the trust to the company for their costs and what they're incurring. So one's a loan repayment from Observatory Village to the trust. The other one is from the trust to the company, and that's the donation.
That's correct. And the $1 million was part of the agreement between council and the Observatory Village. That council could approve up to $1 million to be repaid to Health Services Trust in this year rather than to council itself. So it's really giving authority for this full financial year. The individual arrangements between, this is where it gets 5 entities involved, between Observatory Village and the trust itself is a matter between those two once council says this arrangement is fine.
Yeah, thank you to Paul's, but I'm still not clear. The donation pending authorisation by the elected members, I think, is just the council. So that donation needs to be approved by council.
No.
No, is that not correct?
So council has to approve it. So it goes Observatory Village, rather than coming to council, it goes to the trust. So that's what council needs to approve. And then it goes from the trust to company, which is between those two. But council has to give the first approval right at the start of the series of payments. And that's what item 2 does.
We were to be repaid first. We had priority repayments. We don't actually need it. Hospital does, and so it goes through that. They get that first payment.
Nothing about pending approval, recommendation.
So look, we do need to on this, but Councillor Milmont.
Just a quick question with regards to the debt that keeps occurring. A large proportion of it, of course, is attributable to staff costs and unplanned locum needs, but there's also a whole lot that's been attributed to unplanned equipment purchase at the time that I've been working with the company. I just want assurance that everything that is unplanned is being called up on, and that we're not going to keep getting tripped up with more funds being spent on replacing things. It seems to happen every time new staff members come along. They want updates and different types of equipment and keep going into another hole. So are you confident that we're past spending money on equipment updates that's unplanned?
We will always be spending on money on equipment updates. There will be unplanned ones. We're confident that we've caught the majority of them now. We've got a 5-year capital plan and it's broken down into annualised expenditure, prioritised, and it's run through the departments. So we're feeling comfortable there. I can't say hand on heart there won't be something that pops up, but with the catch up that we've made over the last couple of years, we've got the majority of it.
Okay, Councillor Turndale.
I'm happy to move the recommendations.
1 through 4. Okay, we moved 1 through 4. So the seconder, Councillor Newton. Okay. Right, speaking to them.
Just that, obviously, we've already had the discussion with the Observatory Village group around the setup of the loan, and I think this is just formalising that the intention was that their need was much more severe with the hospital than it is with council currently, and we still are earning more to have it there than sitting in the bank at the present time as well. So it sort of supports that in both ways. The further 12 months, I have got confidence in our board, and I think that they have worked through some pretty challenging times, and then COVID got thrown right on top of that when some real traction was being made. So I appreciate the work that's been done in that respect, and I have full confidence that we will be seeing the other side of this, and happy to support that. And I just think bottom line is hospital for us all is massively important, and we need to be willing as a council to support that. We've got a different setup to most communities, and it becomes a lot more entwined with council than you'd find in other areas. But I think the bottom line is, whether it was entwined with us or not, these services are so important for our community that I would like to think would be sort of offering the style of support if it was required anyway. And I don't see it as being something that ongoing we're going to need to cover by ratepayers, because I actually think we're getting our house in order and we'll be in a situation that we can actually start to see it standing on its own 2 feet. So well done, Shane.
I would struggle, Paul and Mark, in 12 months' time, or at the end of the financial year next year in June, if you found it difficult to repay council 700,000. So that would be an issue that I would be really looking forward to hearing about in the future. That is forecast and planned, and we'll get that money back. So that's my only concern, but otherwise supportive of this proposal.
Understood.
Yeah, thanks for your ongoing work. It's been a major task over the last couple of years to where we are. I definitely think there is the light is at the end of the tunnel. We've got the new CE starting, got new staff starting. I think, you know, that everything is really feeling like it's coming together now, and you know, we are through the worst of times. Like Deputy Mayor said, you know, I have confidence in the board, and you're there to do a job. We know you're working hard to do that. We hope the community is supportive of you getting on and doing that, and is supportive when the new CE arrives as well. But thank you very much. And you know, the important thing is that you know, we're not needing to give you more money at the moment. It's you know, you've got the resources there, and subject to the trust agreeing with the hospital company, of course. So we'll look forward to that decision being made, and hopefully things really picking up from here. And as Councillor McRobie said, 12 months' time, seeing the repayment of that loan.
10 months.
Thanks very much.
Actually, Gary. That'll be
fantastic.
No pressure.
No. But on behalf of the board, thanks very much for your ongoing support. We appreciate it. It's not easy, but we appreciate it.
Okay. Put the motion. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? That's carried. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, councillors, we'll go back to the remits. So we're on to the third one.
Bye.
See ya.
You guys.
Thank you very much. I don't know whether they will stay.
I think we should have
Yes, they're in the public speed. They can be in here. Right. Sorry. What page were we on?
Page 140, Mayor Churchill.
140, talking about returning GST on rates.
Yep. You vote yes for that one?
It has no chance, but go for it.
Yeah, nothing like living in hope. Oh, speaking of the trust. No. Okay, so that's number 3 is we'll vote in favour. Number 4 is natural hazards and climate change adaptation.
Because I guess we have to vote for it. I don't think it goes far enough. And I'd like whoever's speaking on that, when they do vote, to say so. In my view, we should be urging the government to be more proactive and take an approach closer to that of the Netherlands, where there's active protection of areas of the coast, rather than this kind of flagging it and giving away and treating money in every instance. So with that caveat, I'd still say we should vote for it.
Okay, so really just wanting to know people want to vote against. So we're going to take this position that we're voting for the remit. So that's fine. That's a vote for that one. Fifth one, annual regional balance of transfers. So basically, having an understanding each year how much each region contributes in taxes and how much each region receives in government funding.
Interesting.
Interesting. So anyone against that remit?
Apply this for next year as well, probably. Oh, yeah.
Okay, we'll vote in favour of that. Number 6, the local government electoral cycle remit that the electoral cycle will be extended from 3 to 4 years. Anyone want to speak against that? Putting off the Christmas dinner, is it? So we'll vote in favour of that. Item number 7, water bottling. This is one that we show as our council chose as supporting it. It was done, yes, indeed. I'm going to explain that very quickly. There was a very short time frame for remits to go in, and on the 11th hour, Queenstown Lakes District had one of their councillors come forward and said the whole water bottling situation is, there's too much emotion, there's not enough science in the whole process. We need to have a better process around that. So what they've said is put a hold on water bottling permits, if not on any new ones, and let's sort this out, essentially. So that's what this one's looking for. To me, I thought, well, it's one of those things, let's help support it, get it through to this point, and through to the AGM, and be won or lost on the day. So, in the interest of democracy and our order. So, anyway, does anyone want to speak against?
Yes, I do. Right. I can see this. Look, seriously, we've got, at the moment, the problem with water is that there's an awful lot of things that go overseas as water, but aren't water, like wine and so on. And the degree of angst about this is disproportionate to the amount of water, the percentage of water that is actually bottled. I wouldn't mind having a review of some scientific analysis, but I can see a moratorium in the interim becoming essentially a permanent ban. And if you look at some of the other areas in the country where councils have helped to assist with water bottling and funded plants and so on, and are making quite a lot of substantial amount of money, they've created jobs and so on. The moratorium is a bit of the trouble to me, and I would urge, although we are apparently supporting it, I don't think we should when it comes to the vote, personally.
Bear in mind, this is just basically, it becomes a policy of NZ, and then they go and talk to the government about it, so there's a whole lot of steps and so forth. This isn't saying there will be a moratorium if everyone votes for it. And I mean, the reality is, I think, much of what you've said is right. This is the opportunity to actually get a better process around all of that, so the emotion gets away from it, and actually science and understanding of actually what's best use of water in different areas is, that's a far better discussion to be having. So, is anyone else against? Okay, so for number 7, number 8.
Isn't that been done with standing orders?
The quorum in attending local authority meetings. So this one's asking that if any elected members are joining a meeting remotely, that they are counted as part of the quorum. Under normal standing orders, under the local government act, the GOIMA, they aren't normally. We've got the exemption at the moment because of the COVID situation, but that's a finite situation, and the situation is we could go back to previous status quo. So that's, is anyone against that?
Don't stand. We've adopted new standing orders. Which allow people to.
But the act overrides it. At the moment, there's an exemption.
They don't make part of the board.
So you're not against that, are you? No, thank you. Right, number 9, use of macrons by local authorities. This is one of those things that actually is important to a number of people, but it's for where councils want to change their names to include macrons. Apparently, it's a very difficult process at the moment, and if they want to they choose as a council to change it, they want to simplify the process. Yep. It's fine. 10 rebates for low income property owners. So there has been just an increase very recently, but they obviously that's a one-off rather than annual increases. Is anyone against this? That it's fine. Number 11, local governments CO2 emissions. Special one there on Councillor Hopkins' emissions. Sorry, Councillor Hopkins. So that basically the government implements an independent scheme based on the UK model to measure and report carbon emissions at a district level.
Yep. An unnecessary and expensive indulgence, in my view. I vote against it personally. Others may not.
I was going to speak for it, but we're not doing that, are we?
I mean, to me, it's going to help identify actually which districts are causing the problems. So that's not necessarily a bad thing.
And the standardised system, because it's so piecemeal across the country at the moment.
As long as the costs aren't seated home for the districts.
Right. That is the end of that. We've got the rule change. Now, there's going to be a suggested amendment to the rule change. So, local government several terms ago decided that it was going to change the rule on the number of terms that the LGNZ president could serve. It had been 2, and because of the particular situation, the circumstances, succession planning, or lack thereof, having a competent president that people generally wanted to carry on, they changed that to 3 terms. That's known as the York Rule, to Lawrence York, who was the president at the time. What is being put forward is a change to go back to 2 terms. The amendment to that is, sorry, that's it. Yeah. So it's basically to still go with that, but for LGNZ to work on having a system where, under extraordinary circumstances, members can, by 75% votes at the AGM, elect a president for a term. So it gives an out where there's particularly strong support for the president having a 3rd term, but they have to reach a 75% threshold rather than 50% threshold. So any discussion on that?
Sounds reasonable. But it isn't what we've got here on the page, is it, Gary?
Well, it's that, but with an amendment on a second part to it, which is that LGNZ works on getting the part done ready for the next AGM, because it can't be. There's a bit of stuff has to be put together to actually have that situation. I did print it out, but I think it's probably still.
Just trying to get my head around that a wee bit. So after 2 terms, if there was a number of people standing, because I presume that people stand for the role every time regardless, would that mean that person could still throw their hat in the ring and they'd need 75% of the vote? Or does that happen, that discussion before the vote, or how does
Well,
it
there's some of the mechanism that's what has been worked on. So the actual wording that's been put forward, that the National Council bring a book change proposal to the 2021 AGM, outlining a process by which that term could be extended to 3 under exceptional circumstances. So whatever it's going to look like, basically, it means that if there's a similar circumstances happened, it can go forward in that way. And if they say, well, I should stand again, they can stand, but they've got to get 3/4 of the vote, just half.
just to clarify, so if they didn't get 3/4 of the vote, if they got 60%?
This is where it gets into the technicalities. It's like, you know, what does happen then? And well, they're not eligible to stand, so you have to run the vote again. It would be something like that. I mean, it's again, it is for extraordinary circumstances, and it's that's the reason why the wording's not forward as to exactly what it would be, rather than let's work on it and bring it to the next.
But just as a clarification, the percentage is 75%. 75% of members voted for an extension.
That's what the so it's been put forward by Aaron Hawkins from here at Dunedin, and that's what he's talking about. You need a threshold like that.
Well, that's my point. So if we voted on this today, it would be on the understanding that that was the percentage of members required to sign it, give it the tick.
Well, it's going to come to the next. Basically, it's saying, well, let's pass it, we'll reduce it to 2, but National Council work on this so that you've got a situation in the 2021 AGM where we've changed the actual rule another time, you know, at that time to allow for those extraordinary circumstances.
I support the intention of it.
I don't think it's a major thing. It's pretty unusual circumstances. So, yeah. So we'll support that. Okay. Now we quickly move to the pandemic.
Sorry, Nick, we've got the recommendations on page 129. We need to vote on.
No, sorry.
I will move those 4.
Got to go there. Boom. Second, Avondale. Any further discussion? Put it. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Thank you. Right, to the PERM report. Jared Quinn, welcome. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Meehan.
Over to you.
Thank you. To introduce it briefly, in summary, New Zealand has done quite well in the last 3 months, which is obviously flowing through to our district. The primary sector in the food processing chain has actually more than offset the loss from tourism for the country in the first quarter, so that's been fantastic. Visitation to Waitaki has stayed up. In fact, this school holidays we had 30% more visitors to Waitaki from outside the district than we did in the same school holidays last year. Our retail spending has shown that we're generally eating and drinking more. Food and beverage, groceries and liquor are up, but we're buying less in the clothing, retail and homeware stores. And the next few weeks we'll see where we go. You know, there's another crux point as various government support schemes come off, but we do seem to have quite a bit of resilience, which is very encouraging.
Questions? Any questions, Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, Jared, am I right that the numbers you give us are to some extent satisfying? But if we look at 177, below visitor numbers after May and early into June are climbing, it's a bit like the cash numbers later on, that they're not making up for the big drop in that lockdown period, are
I think we have to realise that that was a shock, and we actually now have to just follow the trajectory out of it. I don't think there's any way that we can attempt to offset, new earnings against that. It was a one-off shock. It's like having a hit in your bank balance, but you try and earn more to make up for it.
But am I right also in assuming that all of those numbers, takeaways, accommodation, sport and camping, fuel, all of them there, they all show, if you look at the last year's green and this year's black, they're all basically showing in all of those business sectors, people are going to be significantly down in terms of total turnover, aren't they?
No, it shows that basically we're returning to our 2019 levels.
We are, but there's those big holes in almost every instance over the lockdown period.
Yep.
Good. Congratulations on for us getting that.
It is. I think it's time to be very proactive about promoting the district and hoping to continue that increased visitor numbers for as long as we can, especially when we, there may be a Pacific travel bubble in the near future. I think we want to stay front of mind for people.
So Tourism New Zealand's international campaigning, and they need to be ready. People don't make decisions to travel next week, decisions to travel next year. Any publicity is good publicity. Councillor Talbot? Oh, you're just waving. Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay, so I'd like to move we receive the report. Thank you. Councillor Brody, Councillor Newton. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Against?
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the report, Mr. Quinn. That ends the public part of our agenda. So we're going to be finishing the live stream.